Welcome back to Saravji's Hut. In this week's episode on going through machine learning data science certifications, I'm going to be reporting on the progress that I made, complementing some of the course slides, some reports fresh from the notebooks of labs that I did go through, and a new badge that I got. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Saravji's Hut. Going through the certification of the Google Cloud Professional Machine Learning Engineer, reporting on the progress in week 6. I'm going to be using the course slides to actually complement them and make a couple of comments that are kind of reinforcing what I did say for the last few weeks. Then I'm going to be reporting fresh from the notebooks out of the labs that I did go through, and that I have received a new badge. So let's dive in. This week I made pretty good progress. I have a few details that I'm going to be talking about just in a second, but all in all I made good progress. What I decided to do is I'm going to be complementing the slides that are being used throughout the course materials and that are being made available to the students, to actually point out a few things that I think are noteworthy for the Google materials. I touched on a couple of those already in the past few weeks, but I thought I'd take actually Google's own slides to drive home that point a little bit more visually. So this slide that you're seeing here is actually slide 71 from the course How Google Does Machine Learning. The materials talk about what the expectation of the effort allocation for machine learning pipelines is, and what in reality it actually is. And I thought this is a very fitting slide. So what I actually want to do with the slide is visualize, as a complement to this slide, how so far the Google course materials have been allocated. And this is basically what the courses are focusing on. It is the last few percent, or the last few steps in collecting data. Most of the data sets that the course materials are actually using are curated data sets, so you don't even need to understand the data or know where the data is coming from. You just copy a complete data set, and with this comes the data set is very well understood, so you don't need to explore the data set, you don't need to get to know the data set. Somebody already has done it, and the course materials simply take that as for granted, that you accept what you're being told there. Also, the data is very clean, or where it is not clean, it is very well understood how it is not clean and how to clean it. So all these points are not realistic for an actual work environment. This is a typical educational course material environment where you're working with very clean, very well understood data sets with a very straight line of an approach to get from A to B, from the beginning to the end. And it is just step by step, 1, 2, 3 steps, and you're there. And it does not work in this way in the real world. The same with actually going through the process, building the infrastructure, building the ML models to get to the point of predictions. And some of the models that I have been working for so far in the machine learning labs, you just click, 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 and it just works. It is in real life simply not reasonable that you have a data set that you're getting 98% accuracy on image recognition with multiple categories if you have only 20 training sets or training points for each category. That is not realistic. So what is actually happening here, it's a model that has memorized a lot of the features that is being used here, or the model has been used to pre-train the model and that is being used. So it is simply not real life setting. The second slide is out of the slide deck for the course launching into machine learning. It's slide number 357. It specifically states that skewed data can make inappropriate strategies seductive. This is what I mentioned last week and the week before, I think. Some of the data sets that these course materials are working with I consider as not being appropriate for the course or how they're being used in the course because they are so extremely skewed. In this example, it's talking about a car parking lot with 1000 spaces, 990 of them are taken, 10 are available. So creating a ML model that always reports that the space was occupied would be right 99 out of 100 times. And this kind of skewedness actually happens in some of the labs because of the imbalance of the data sets that is being used, that machine learning algorithms are going to 100% predicting for one of the categories. This is real world problems, but they're not handled appropriately in the labs. They're not discussed in the labs, they're not addressed in the labs, and the labs are not built up in the right way to handle these kinds of problems. And because of that, those labs are very misleading and are actually teaching wrong techniques. Also, fresh from the notebooks, when I was going through the notebooks for doing EDA, exploratory data analytics or analysis, I was not familiar with one of the plots out of the Seaborn library that was being used or mentioned in the materials. And I actually had to look it up, and I forgot about this plot, and the reason being the plot that I'm talking about is the factor plot, Seaborn factor plot, and that I wasn't aware of being in the library. And after looking it up, and I actually remembered this plot because it was renamed to cat plot, like a categorical plot, in the July 2018 release. So 4 years ago it was actually renamed, and because of that I simply wasn't acutely aware of its existence under the name factor plot anymore. What I want to point out here is that some of the materials appear to be a little bit dated, and when you're going through those materials, simply be on the lookout for these kinds of occurrences. Last but not least, I completed one more of the elements of the course or all the materials, and I got an additional badge, so it's going to be showing up in the background for next week. And with that, thanks for visiting me at my hut, and I'm going to be continuing going through the materials and reporting back next week. I appreciate you dropping by. Please subscribe, I've done here. Fire to that.